Hey Reddit. So I, 26 male, received a letter that my estranged parents had sent to me through my aunt asking me to help them out with a lawsuit. Interestingly enough, the lawsuit is against my younger brother, and that's the reason why I got kicked out of my house and cut off by my family 5 years ago. So I'm kind of confused about what to do right now. My brother, James, 23 male, and I have pretty much grown up constantly hating and fighting each other. The sibling rivalry was pretty bad, and I totally blame my parents for that because whenever I was younger, it became really clear to me after James was born that he was their priority now. And that made me really jealous. So while we were growing up, I would try everything in my power to get their attention. And when James was a little older as well, he started doing the same thing, and without even realizing it, we started competing with each other. And instead of discouraging that and making sure that we got along well, our parents encouraged that kind of behavior, and we ended up hating each other. So that was pretty sad because I really do feel like James and I could have grown up normally if our parents hadn't encouraged our sibling rivalry. And the cherry on top of that was that no matter how much I tried, it seemed like my parents were always going to prefer James over me. He was their golden son who couldn't ever do anything wrong, and it was pretty obvious to me after one point. And that made me resent him even more. So eventually, the fights were not childish and petty anymore. They were really nasty, and after one such fight 5 years ago, he decided to make some false accusations of theft against me and got me kicked out of the house. I had been home back from college during the holidays, and I don't even remember what we had fought about. But I remember that the next evening he started throwing a tantrum about how his card had gone missing earlier that day and forced everyone to look all over the house for it. Obviously, we couldn't find it anywhere, and then while he was looking for it in my room, he found it in my wallet and started screaming about how I had stolen his card. I was pretty sure that he was the one who planted it in my wallet, so I started to deny his accusations. But then he said he did not trust me and pushed me out of my room and locked me out so that he could go through my belongings and see if I had purchased anything new with his money. My parents did not even intervene, even though this was extremely humiliating and unnecessary, because even if I had stolen his card, like he said, I certainly wouldn't even have known how to access his funds. That was just common sense. But I don't think anybody from my family possesses that. Anyway, I thought finding his card in my wallet would be the worst of it. But then, a couple of minutes later, he came out of my room with a brand new MacBook and started accusing me of buying that with his money because he had just checked his bank account and said that I had practically drained it. I don't know how much money he had to begin with, but the MacBook that he had bought, claiming that it had been me, couldn't have cost more than $1,500. And I know that for a fact, since I had been researching and planning to buy that for myself. But with my own money, of course. Anyway, when he brought that out of my room and started saying that I had hidden it very carefully under my bed so that nobody would be able to find it, I started denying it and we started fighting again. I could hardly believe that he had pulled off something like this because by then I was totally sure that he had planted that card and the MacBook in my room at some point, and now he was going out of his way to get me into hot water with our parents. While we were arguing and I was trying to defend myself with all the right logic and stuff, like the fact that I didn't even know how to access his money and his card being on me meant absolutely nothing, my parents did not say anything. They stayed quiet for a while, but then James started crying and accusing me of spending his hard-earned money without his consent, which was apparently breaking his heart because he had been saving up to buy a car that year. And as usual, his tears were all that was needed for my parents to immediately decide whose side they were on. As soon as he started crying, they went into parent mode and started consoling him as if some great tragedy had taken place in his life. I couldn't even believe that they were buying his act, and I even told him that he was the one who had planned all of this, so he did not deserve the sympathy. But at that point, my parents told me that they had had enough of me bullying my brother, and this was the last straw. I had no idea what they meant by that, and I was still trying to defend myself. But my parents then told me that they did not want to hear me out at all because they were sure that James would not lie about something like this. And they told me that they were really ashamed of the fact that they had raised a thief like me. And then finally, they asked me to pack my things and leave the house immediately. Even after they told me to leave, I tried to reason with them and explain to them that I hadn't done anything that I was being accused of, and that James was lying to him, but they were just not interested. They had decided that I was a thief, and now they wanted me to leave the house and were also going to cut off the funds that they had been sending me so far, so I wouldn't even be able to pay for my tuition in my final year of college. I did have some money saved aside, but that was barely enough to cover anything, and so I put up a fight to prevent myself from getting kicked out, but I couldn't do it. Eventually, I had to leave that day, and I landed up at my aunt's house. I explained the situation to her, and she was very understanding about it. She and her husband pulled together some money, and it was enough to cover my expenses for that year. So I was immensely grateful to them. My aunt is my mom's older sister, and she doesn't have any kids of her own. So I guess that's why she was ready to help her out, but I did not take that for granted. Even though she never asked for it, I made sure that I started paying her back as soon as I got my first job. I'm pretty sure it would have taken me way longer to graduate had she and my uncle chosen not to help me out at the time. For the past 5 years, I haven't been in touch with my family, but I make an appointment to speak to my aunt and uncle almost every week. I wasn't very close to the rest of my family anyway, so I hardly have any contact with anybody else, and I'm not very active on social media either. So it's just my aunt and a couple of old friends who know where I live and what I have been up to in the past 5 years. Thankfully, life hasn't actually been bad, and I'm doing well enough for myself. I don't miss my family at all because honestly, I've come to terms with the fact that they never loved me and definitely not enough to question my brother's intentions. I did not want to know anything about them because I was just not interested. So I told everybody in my life that even if they did find out anything about my parents and James and what they were up to, I did not want to hear it. I wanted to move on without any of them in my life, and that's what I have done. So I've never looked back after I got kicked out, and it wasn't until recently that I found out what was going on with my family, only because of the letter that they sent to me through my aunt. Everybody in my life had the strictest instructions that they were not allowed to speak to my family about my whereabouts and give out my contact info. So that's why my aunt hadn't told them anything about my address or how to contact me when they had visited her to ask about me. And because of that, they couldn't contact me directly, so they left a letter with her, and she brought it to me. In that letter, my parents told me that they were really sorry for how they had treated me in the past, and they had started to see that James was not the perfect son that they thought they had raised. Apparently, lots of things had gone wrong after I got kicked out of the family, like James had decided to take a gap year after high school, but then it turned into another year. And all of a sudden, he had just wasted 3 years of his life doing nothing but partying with his friends every weekend and playing video games all day. He hadn't even bothered to take up any jobs and lived off of his parents, even though they tried to get him to do something about this. And then 2 years back, my dad started his own business, and that took up a lot of money. So they gave my brother an ultimatum and told him that he needed to find a job or else he would get kicked out. James then had the genius idea of asking his dad to hire him. And after some discussion, my parents agreed to do that because then they could train him to take over in the future. For a couple of months, things went smoothly, and he even got a place of his own with the money that he had been making, working with our dad. But then my dad started to notice discrepancies in the accounts, and since my brother was responsible for it, he questioned him, and my brother admitted that he had been stealing some money for a few weeks. But he had never thought that he would get caught because he didn't think it was significant enough to come under the radar. This was almost a year ago, and my parents had been very upset, but they had forgiven him and didn't even fire him. I don't know why they would do that, because that just showed him that he could get away with whatever he wanted to because they were more concerned about their family and reputation and stuff like that. So he did stuff like this again, and once again when he was caught, he apologized profusely and started begging my parents not to fire him. And once again, it worked. But like they say, the third time's the charm. And this time, a few weeks back, when he was caught stealing from the company again, my parents decided to fire him and file a lawsuit against him for embezzlement. They had decided to skip the mediation because they did not want to settle out of court. They wanted this to go to trial so they could get him to return all their money and also have him punished for whatever he had been putting them through. And they were writing to me, not just because they wanted to acknowledge their mistakes, but because they wanted me to help them out by testifying against my brother. It had taken them 5 years to realize that I had been telling the truth that day, and that I obviously hadn't stolen my brother's car to buy a MacBook for myself. They were finally ready to accept that maybe he had created that situation just to get me in trouble, but now it's not enough anymore. From the letter, I figured out that after I got kicked out, my brother had an extremely easy life. He had been working part-time jobs in high school, but once he had framed me and got kicked out, I guess my parents went soft on him, and that's why they allowed him to quit working altogether for almost 3 years. And he got to be lazy and do nothing while I was out here, juggling work and education so that I could pay back my aunt eventually and go ahead in life. It felt extremely unfair, and an apology was not going to fix that. So that letter really didn't mean much to me. Besides, I know that they are writing to me because they need my help to testify against my brother and have him punished. But I don't think they would have ever needed to take things so far if they had disciplined my brother in the past. I don't even know if they actually mean their apology or if it's just because they want me to help them out. And even if it was genuine, I have my work and my life to think about. I don't want to disturb that. I'm happy with everything the way it is, and I'm really not interested in going back to my family drama because the past 5 years have been lonely but peaceful, and that's exactly how I want it. I know that this is an excellent opportunity to get back at my brother for everything that he did. And it's great that my parents have finally realized that he's not a good person and are willing to punish him for it. But for me, it's too little too late, and I'm not interested in helping them out. However, the only thing that has been holding me back right now from telling my parents that I'm not willing to help them out is the fact that I know that my testimony will make the biggest difference of all. And I don't know if opting to stay out of this would be the right thing to do, given the circumstances. I just feel very strangely guilty. So AITA for not wanting to help my parents out to sue my brother? Update 1. Hey, so it's been a couple of days since I posted, and yesterday I spoke to my aunt and told her that I wanted her to tell my parents that I was not going to be helping them out. I realized that I like my life the way that it is, and I don't want to get back in touch with my parents. I really hope that they are able to bring my brother to justice and things work out for them, but I don't want to be a part of it. I knew for a fact that if I decided to help them out, I would have to talk to them, and maybe they would end up back in my life, which is not something I'm looking forward to right now because I don't think I've forgiven them. Also, be it to punish him or not, I don't want anything to do with my brother. So there. When I told my aunt about my decision, she told me that she thought I was doing the right thing, even if it was going to make things slightly difficult for my parents. But honestly, in the past 5 years, they had never cared about how difficult things have been for me, so I don't need to sit and think about that either. My aunt is not particularly fond of my parents, honestly. She never has been. Unlike the rest of the family, she couldn't pretend that she couldn't see how openly they favored James over me and how frequently they pitted us against one another. Unlike the rest of the family, she couldn't keep quiet about it and would often scold my parents about it, but it never mattered to them, and it just made their relationship go sour because obviously my parents did not like to be told what to do and how to raise their children. So my aunt and my mother didn't have a particularly good relationship either. And after I got kicked out, my aunt stopped attending any of their events because she wanted nothing to do with them. And even they had very low contact for the past 5 years. My aunt also told me that when my parents had come to visit her and talked to her about me and what I had been up to, they had barely asked anything about me. They were mostly just talking about how difficult things have been for them with my brother and everything, and how they need my help. She could tell that even now they hardly even cared about me and only wanted to apologize so they could get me to help them out. But she hadn't told me about it earlier because she did not want to influence my opinions, and she wanted my decision to be my own. And I understand and appreciate that. Anyway, that just reinforced the fact that I have made the right decision about staying away. Update 2. Hello, so I'm back after almost 3 days of my last post since my parents decided to reach out to me directly this time. Somehow they were able to find my account on Facebook and they reached out to me there. They sent me a message saying that they were really desperate to talk to me because they had heard from my aunt that I was not willing to help them out. And that was really disappointing for them because they were counting on me. At first, I did not respond. So they kept sending me messages telling me that it was not like they were only contacting me because of the lawsuit. They had apparently wanted to reach out to me for a while now. But unfortunately, they had never found the spine to do so because of how they had treated me in the past. And they were ashamed of themselves. However, now they had realized how wrong they were, and they wanted me to be the bigger person and forgive them. They even told me that in the past few months, ever since my brother had started acting out, they had realized that they had made a huge mistake by kicking me out and cutting me off, and they had even told my brother about it. I don't know why they were saying that to me. I guess they didn't realize that for me, this is not about me and James. This is about me and my parents. I never had any expectations from James in the first place. He was just a jerk from the get-go. But I did expect a certain amount of love and affection from my parents, at least. And they failed to provide that to me. So after everything that they have put me through emotionally, I don't feel the need to help them out or respond to their messages. And since they had been messaging me nonstop for the past 2 days, I decided to block them earlier. I replied to them saying that I was really not interested And I did not appreciate the fact that they were trying to guilt trip me into getting involved. So I was blocking them, and I would appreciate it if they did not try to contact me again and left me alone. I don't know if this is going to be effective because I'm sure they will find another way to contact me, but for now, this works. From what I know, they have also been badgering my aunt about me and telling her to talk to me and get me to agree to help them out somehow, but even she's been ignoring them. I don't even understand why they are so desperate to have me testify against my brother because, as far as I'm concerned, I think they have enough proof against him to manage to deal with this without my help. I'm guessing it's just them trying to be on the safe side. Or maybe they just want me back because now that they're losing one son, they probably want their backup son or something. Update 3. I blocked my parents earlier this week, and since then, we have had no contact. For almost 4 days, I did not hear from them, and I almost thought that they were over this. But today, when I came back home from work, they were there waiting for me to return. As soon as they saw me, before I could even process what was going on, they jumped to their feet and came towards me to hug me. I was very disoriented and shocked, so I couldn't even do anything about it, and they were hugging me, crying about how long it had been, and just being very emotional. Unfortunately, I did not feel the same way, so as soon as I came to my senses, I asked them what they were doing there and how they had found me. They could hear that I was not pleased to see them, but they didn't care. They just told me that they had asked around and one of my old friends had told them. This friend of mine and I are no longer on good terms anyway, so I guess she couldn't care less. Anyway, that's how my parents had found me and showed up at my house. And now they wanted me to give a real shot at reconciling with them. I was kind of tired after work, but I didn't want to be rude, and neither did I want to fight with them out on the street, so I invited them in, and the first thing I did was make it very clear to them that no matter what, I was not going to be testifying in court against anyone. So if that's the reason why they were here, they could choose not to waste their time and go back home. But my parents told me that's not the only reason they were here. They said they had enough evidence against my brother anyway, and the testimonies were just going to be something to add to it. They could understand why I did not want to get involved, but they had just offered me that opportunity because they knew that making sure that my brother was punished for everything would probably mean more to me than it would mean to them. But if I didn't want to take that opportunity out, they would still understand. Now, they were only here to make things right with me and try to fix the past. I told them that I appreciated it, but I couldn't just forgive them within a week or so. I needed my space and time, and I felt like they had been overstepping their boundaries ever since they wrote that letter because I had made it very clear that I did not want to get back in touch at the moment, and yet they had just ignored that completely. One of the major reasons that I refused to testify against my brother was because I did not want to get back in touch with my parents yet. I had not been able to forgive them yet, and so I did not like them forcing their presence on me, and yet that's all they had been doing. It was quite frustrating, and they got very offended after that. They told me that it had been 5 years since our fight, and they knew that they had messed up, but they were trying to apologize and make up for it. If I didn't even give them a chance to do that, though, then they never would be able to fix the situation. They were basically trying to make me feel guilty for not wanting to immediately forgive them and pretend like everything was fine again. And that was quite annoying, so I told them that I couldn't just forgive them because they wanted me to. It had to come from within, and constantly pestering me about it was not going to make it happen quicker. By refusing to give me space, they were just making sure that it took longer for me to accept them back into my life again. And once again, they were messing up without even realizing it. So we started arguing, And by the end, my parents were furious and yelling at me about how ungrateful and egoistic I was being. They thought that apologizing to me should have been enough, and the fact that I was claiming I needed space was just all an act. They thought that I was just being overdramatic. As soon as they started yelling at me, I told them the conversation was over because they were not going to stand under my roof and scream at me. In the past 5 years, they had not done anything for me, and I did not owe them anything at all. So I told them to leave immediately, and when they refused, I told them I would call the cops otherwise. That led to even more drama since my mother started having a breakdown, saying that she had no idea that loving and wanting your child back in your life would lead to them threatening to call the cops on her as if it was a crime. And then my dad started yelling at me about making my mom cry, demanding that I apologize to both of them for behaving like this. I couldn't handle it anymore, so I just started screaming at them to get out until they finally did, and then I slammed the door shut. In a way, I'm actually kind of glad that I decided to invite them in, because I'm sure that if I had decided against it, they would have thrown a temper tantrum out on the street itself, and that would have been a lot more embarrassing for me. Update 4. Hey guys, so it's been 3 months since my last update, and I've had a few interactions with my parents since then. None of them have been pleasant, unfortunately, but it's fine. I'm moving away in a few days, so I don't think that's going to be happening again. Before I get into that, though, I would just like to tell you guys that my brother got convicted with charges of embezzlement and is facing up to 3 years. We don't know the details because my aunt just heard about it from family gossip. But yeah, that's about it. Serves him right, to be honest. And I'm glad my parents did it, even though I can't stand them anymore. Anyway, about a week after our last fight, they had shown up at my house again. And this time, before they could even say anything, I had called the cops and had them taken off my property. They went kicking and screaming, but at least they left. And it was a huge relief. After that, I started receiving phone calls and texts from them telling me I was a disgrace as a son and that they had probably done the right thing by kicking me out all those years ago, so they did not feel the need to apologize to me anymore. I decided to ignore it at first, but then it started getting on my nerves because they just didn't know where to stop. So eventually, I decided to speak to a lawyer and file for a restraining order against my parents. Given their behavior, it was not difficult for me to have it granted, and at least for the next 2 years, I won't have to worry about them bothering me again, unless they want to have the cops called on them again, of course. And now, if they show up again near me and get in trouble with the police, they won't be let off as easily as they had been before. So it's really up to them what they want. I have even advised my aunt to take legal action against them because they haven't even spared her. My mother had sent a really hateful email a couple of weeks ago saying that she knew that my aunt was trying to steal her son away from her because she couldn't have any children of her own. And I think it's probably one of the most insensitive things my parents have ever said to someone else. My aunt didn't seem to care and told me not to pay attention to it either. But I thought it was really nasty. Anyway, I'm trying my best not to get affected by them anymore because, like I said, I'm moving away since I got a better job about a month ago, and so my girlfriend and I have decided to rent a house together. We've been together for almost 6 months now, and we want to get serious. So that's why we're doing this, and I think it's the perfect time. So apart from the few bad interactions with my parents recently, I think life has been pretty great. I'm moving in with my girlfriend. I have a great job, and of course, I still have my aunt and uncle standing by me no matter what. I don't think I need to care about what my parents do at all. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships.